Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions podcast. I'm Emery Cuzzy, sitting here with Cameron Selby, and today we're going to go over the top 50 running backs on our fantasy rankings. Um, you know, a lot of guys are in our rankings. We're going to have some guys that you probably haven't seen this high, but as we get closer to the season, you're going to see them rising up the boards. There's a guy we're going to really talk about here in a little bit that, we have been getting a lot in best ball because we think that he will end up being, either the number one or the 1B on their offense. So, yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, with running back, it was always the most, important position to target over the years when we first started playing fantasy, and now it's kind of become somewhat an afterthought, and especially in best ball drafts. So there's a really huge discrepancy. I know you'll see an average ranking on the board, but you know, redraft leagues like ESPN and Yahoo way different on a lot of people, and especially these rookies and stuff. Which again, targeting rookie running backs, we talk time and time again how important that is, and especially with this first tier that we'll talk about, tier 8.
Yeah, let me change it. All right. Yeah, so our first tier is tier 8. Like he said, it's our handcuff zone. Basically an injury away from being a running back 2. So starting at the bottom, you get Chuba Hubbard, Panthers. Right now he might even be the starter week 1, depending on how Jonathan Brooks comes back. And then he will be the handcuff directly to Jonathan Brooks, probably a 1B. Ty Chandler, it's a weird situation in Minnesota, but he is, the number 2. He was the number 2 last year, even, and at times played better than Alexander Madison. Zach Charbonnet, the backup to Kenneth Walker, who we have seen go down. Rico Dowdle, him and Zeke are fighting and vying for, that position in Dallas. And then Antonio Gibson, the backup to Ramondre Stevenson. Out of those first 5, who's your favorite to get to? Obviously, in best ball drafts, they're all over the place pricing wise. And Antonio Gibson actually might be the lowest of them.
So to me, it's purely who you're targeting. Again, this tier is called handcuff zone. Essentially, all of these guys are capable of being RB2s, but they're just kind of stuck. A lot of them don't really have a role until some kind of injury goes down. There's not really many in these. I mean, you can make an argument for like Tyler Algier being a goal line caliber back, Charbonnet taking some pass catching away from Kendall Walker, Rico Dowdle as a change of pace back for now if Dallas stays with the same backfield. But essentially, most of them are just kind of where are you going with your first couple running backs and kind of target. I mean, you look at it's not a spectacular list of names, but Chuba Hubbard last year when Miles Sanders kind of was banged up and then also didn't take advantage of his opportunity. The last half of the season, weeks 9 through 17, he was RB13 overall. So he was the top RB2. So that is exactly what we're talking about is just they're just one injury away from opportunity. Ty Chandler had a big game in the fantasy playoffs if you started him. He had over 160 all-purpose yards and a touchdown. Charbonnet didn't really do a great job with his opportunity. He was a high commodity last year when he came out as like one of the first, rookies in the 100, 120 range.
Yeah.
And Rico Dowdle had some games where he outscored Tony Pollard. You would think that he would get more of the PPR caliber stats this year. And then Antonio Gibson, again, wide receiver converted to running back. He's just never been able to figure it out. And now he's in New England, which New England has the easiest strength of schedule for running backs, but it's one of the worst teams. But also, if you're just a pass catching back, you're going to be trailing a lot.
You might be
good game scripts for him. Things, so, taking him as the RB5 on your team when you took a chance on Ramondre Stevenson in a hero-esque build, round 7, round 8.
Right.
That's a very reasonable way to go.
Yeah, and I was going to think, like looking up there, Antonio Gibson probably has, in PPR, I think he's probably the one that, you get to the most because of the fact that he gets the pass catching downs. He's the James White role. And he's the lowest ranked of all those guys, except for Chuba Hubbard. Him and Tyler Algier are about the same when it comes to draft or when it comes to best ball. But then looking at the left side up there, Tyler Algier, he is truly the probably my favorite handcuff. Like if Bijan goes down, Tyler Algier will get every single touch. And then you go up to Blake Corum, he'll get every touch too, but we don't believe that he's actually as good as 39th overall average. Moving
Yeah.
Mark,
So
go ahead. Sorry.
no, you're good. Just kind of banter back and forth. But Tyler Algier, again, he was the annoying
Mm,
gnat for Bijan last year, not fulfilling out his expected workload. But again, it's a different system now. Who knows if they're going to be a 1A, 1B, or if it's purely going to be he's a new AJ Dillon esque running
right.
back. But he's a more talented version of that. He showed that with his opportunities. Like, 4.5+ yards a carry is nothing to sneeze at. Did very well, but again, I just not really any pass catching upside,
Mm-hmm.
and it's purely if Bijan it's year two, like you spent a top 10 pick on him, you need to be running him into the ground, so to speak, which not great for running backs, but great for us,
Right.
fantasy
Yeah,
nerds. So,
absolutely.
very interesting one. Blake Corum is somebody that of this tier we're probably the lowest on, outside of Zach Charbonnet, of course, -5 in terms of negative differential between consensus. It's mainly just because we just don't believe that there is really any role, and right now he's in the top 40 on most platforms that we're looking at. Average ranking of 39, and we have him at 44. Obviously, we just think that Kyron Williams, it's not broke, don't fix it.
If Kyron is healthy, guys, if Kyron is healthy, he will get 20 to 25 rushes a game. There's just what is okay. So what are the percentages you can think of that Blake Corum gets? He's 30% of the snaps,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, and that's pushing it possibly
Right.
because if you listen to Sean McVay, he wants to put Kyron Williams on the field. That he makes the team better is what he
Mm-hmm.
has said. Um, so I just don't see a path unless Kyron Williams is injured
And the thing is,
for Blake Corum.
Kyron, because he's somewhat banged up in OTAs and stuff, his ADP's kind of dropped into the third rounds in best ball drafts in both underdog and best ball. I'm sorry, and
And DraftKings.
DraftKings.
Mm-hmm.
So we're getting a lot of shares of him, but by far he has the highest ADP compared to everybody else in this range. And so you really have to draft him before Zeke,
Mm-hmm.
who could get a starting workload, and all these guys that are still potential 1As. And we just don't see that.
Jerome Ford.
But it's still
Yeah,
reasonable,
for
and
sure.
if you wanted to draft him because you drafted Kyron Williams, we're all for that. But again, we just kind of think that there's a more limited workload out front unless there's an injury, which we can't predict injuries. But so if Kyron goes down, he's a top 20 caliber back.
Right. Exactly. And then jumping up to Marshawn Lloyd, he is actual complement.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that we talk about, when we watched, we did the draft stuff. Marshawn Lloyd is one of the only guys that came into a situation where he complements the backfield better than the other guys, right? So he has an opportunity to carve out a role even as a true handcuff. I mean, if Josh Jacobs goes down, Marshawn Lloyd is the guy. AJ Dillon will probably be his backup, but at the beginning of the tail end of it, week 3, you should expect Marshawn Lloyd to play 40% of the snaps. In my eyes,
Well, I think it'll be a slow burn, but you're right. He is a great compliment to Josh Jacobs. The only thing and difference between everybody else in this range is, we talk about if they're an injury away from just purely getting all the workload. Well, he will get most of the workload if and when Josh Jacobs goes down. But I could still see a scenario where AJ Dillon vultures touchdowns.
right?
And, that could be annoying, so to speak, on a weekly basis. If you just have the 17 touches for an efficient 90 yards and somebody else is punching in the goal line work like Kareem Hunt has done so often with Nick Chubb
Mm,
or what have you. So I can see that, but very solid, very easy to handcuff both,
yeah, and
and we like him a lot.
he's a good pass catcher, so that adds to his floor, I
Hmm.
guess. And then Kendre Miller, back up to Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara is one of the guys that we'll talk about later, but he's much higher in our rankings, just like Kendre Miller here, 4.2 points above consensus. A guy that, if he gets the opportunities, he will do really well with them. So,
Yeah, I mean, with Kendre Miller, he's a second-year player coming out of TCU. Um, he was kind of went to a awkward spot when
mhm.
he was drafted. I mean, Kamara has been there, and then Jamal Williams went there after leading the league in touchdowns. And so it was just like there was no we basically drafted none of him last year,
Hmm.
even though he was going in the 170 range, which is where most rookies go.
Right.
Um, we just didn't see any path for him, and turns out we were pretty much right. And that was in spite of Jamal Williams absolutely, being one of the bigger busts last year. And Alvin Kamara actually came back from his suspension and really was a formidable running back still,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
RB1 esque. So we like him. It's another year of Alvin Kamara getting older. I think Jamal Williams has kind of got phased out last year. Um, I don't see it as a three-headed monster. It's more of a, he is the true backup, but he's a dual threat
Yeah.
for sure.
And then one guy that, this is our biggest difference. This is a guy we're talking about at the beginning of the show. Kamani Vidal up 13 differential for the position. We're getting ahead of it. That's the the plan. We have basically dropped J.K. Dobbins. We cannot. He is undraftable at this point just because of his injuries. We love J.K. Dobbins. We have in the past. We both have drafted him, and then injuries have happened prior to us drafting him.
Right.
So we've always really enjoyed him, but truly, it's Kamani Vidal, Gus Edwards in this backfield, and I don't see why Kamani Vidal couldn't be the guy because Gus Edwards has so much injury history.
So
And,
yeah, like you said, this is our highest differential. 13 spots different. Mostly everybody is in the right outside of the top 50 for him. Obviously, ESPN is in the 60s, but we're not relying on redraft ADPs that strongly because it's June.
right.
But really, like you said, we're getting ahead of the game. Gus Edwards went down with injury. He may be ready for camp. Who knows if that's true or not? And I know it's June, but he's getting a lot of reps with the ones. JK, I feel like, is not really a threat. He's like the Rashad Penny,
Mm-hmm.
and his ADP's plummeted because of it. Really, and then also we saw Austin Eckler come out with the interview the other day of like why he decided to part ways, and he said that Greg Roman and the new system, they want somebody to touch the ball 300 times,
Right.
and he's like, that's not me. And so it's like,
Well,
well, who is it going to be? Because Gus Edwards has never had close to that kind of workload. And
Kamani Vidal had 200 and something, 250 plus rushes last year in his senior season. We talked about him on our because the Chargers had one of our favorite drafts overall, and he was a late round pick, and I was like, but that guy has an opportunity because of the fact that there is no real threat to him getting touches as a number 2 and possibly as taking over the number 1 spot. If he gets 50% of the snaps, you're very happy.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, when he came out of Troy, especially over the last 2 years, 230 carries and then 26 receptions. Following season, 297, one of the league nation leaders in rushing yards in 1,661, 15 total touchdowns.
Yeah.
He knows how to be productive when he gets volume. And if this is an all offense that just is looking for somebody to grab that and run with it, he's the perfect guy.
Yeah.
And obviously, Gus Edwards, he's not going at an unreasonable range. It's kind of awkward because he's right where we see others that could fault themselves even higher than him. So we're not getting a ton of him. I could see him still having the 10 caliber touchdown that he did last year. He had 13 touchdowns. But yeah, we're ahead of the curve on Kamani. He may be a little high, but we're trying to be ahead of the game and just trying to emphasize because his ADP is rising as we speak. We were probably going to see him go in the 13th round, even though his ADP says he should be a 15th rounder in our drafts that we do later. Yeah, that's what we're all about him right now.
Yeah, and we're about to we'll jump over to the next tier. It's an opportunity for big workload, ADP value dependent. That's where Gus Edwards sits, only 2 spots ahead of Kamani Vidal, and that's because, and not that when it comes to drafting, I think he's probably 50 spots ahead when it comes to drafting in his ADP. So that makes it a little bit harder to be like, okay, I want Gus Edwards. If you want Gus Edwards, you have to get Kamani Vidal in the same draft every time. So Gus Edwards at 39, Devin Singletary, most likely the starter for the Giants, but I've heard some things in camp also for another rookie. So you never know. Jerome Ford, really sad what happened to Nick Chubb. We hope that he gets back on the field. And right now, if you look at our rankings, Nick Chubb is 36th. That little whatever's going on in Cleveland right there, that's going to be a really big deal come training camp, getting us to really know what the timeline is, and it'll change our rankings obviously. Tyjae Spears, paired up with Tony Pollard and Tennessee, both scat backs. They're both going to get opportunities. Raheem Mostert, one of our lowest differentials, playing for the Miami Dolphins, and then Zeke, rounding out the tier, expecting him to get a big workload, possibly the 20 to 20 type of guy. So
Right. So yeah, we'll start with Devin Singletary, 6.8 spots below consensus. Mainly, he's getting the high ADP because he's by default the starting running back. But again, he went to one of the worst situations that he could have asked for. He just went for purely volume perspective. We've seen bad teams produce great running backs. Last year, Devin Singletary made the most of his opportunity, despite we think he's an average running back. Yet, weeks 9 through 17, he was RB10 overall in PPR leagues. So he did the most what he could. We thought he basically displaced Dameon Pierce, who, people vaulted to being a 5th-round pick. That's a person that, I took the bait on and was wrong
right.
last year. I just don't know if it's the right situation for him. And I just don't love continually investing my money into just average players on bad teams.
Yeah, the Giants, exactly. And then also, having a rookie behind him, much younger, they might say, hey, let's give this guy the opportunities. We might even be late on him because we don't like the team.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big thing. And then Gus Edwards, as we've talked about, injury concerns in this last couple of weeks, he's had injuries. And that's just kind of how his career's gone. So Kamani Vidal and him, basically being the two guys there, should be interesting just to start out the year. Jerome Ford, he's the guy that we really probably need to talk about on this slide.
Yeah, he's really interesting because, you know, we've done a lot of best balls with DraftKings and Underdog. Underdog has absolutely taken a stand on Jerome Ford, at least at the starting point of the season, is going to be the guy. And Nick Chubb isn't going to be ready because their ADP is now a full round apart between each other. If you look on DraftKings, as of what we did a couple days ago, Nick Chubb is still 6, 7 spots higher.
Yeah.
So the very difference of opinion there. But Jerome Ford's a talented running back. And last year when Nick Chubb went down weeks 3 through 17, he finishes RB13 overall. So early RB2. And right now, the biggest concern with him is just you don't know how long term of an investment it is. But when you're looking best ball, say you go the hero running back route, right? And this round 8 through 10, a lot of rookie running backs, Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson. If you like Blake Corum, even if you like Kamani Vidal, it's never a guarantee that early on they're immediately just going to get all the workload. Well, Jerome Ford could very well the first 4 weeks just have a 1A or even the full workload. We don't know if Nick Chubb is going to be ready. So, he's a guy that at least he's so safe for you, at least in the early part. And then if he makes the most of it, or Nick Chubb is just never going to get back to what we truly think he will be, he could sneak into the top 15 once again this year. And I wouldn't be shocked. And we're higher on him, but still have him ranked 38.
Right.
So, and I feel like that's a little low.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm with you. It's a little scary just to think that a guy in the 40s for most rankings could end up so high because of the fact that he might just be the guy. He's a good pass catcher, so he doesn't fall off there either. So he's one guy that could move up in our rankings if we do get any news about Nick Chubb. Tyjae Spears, his situation is interesting. We don't know who's going to be the starter, but it's 50-50 to me on snaps. Who's more productive? That's the real question at the end of the day to me. But they're going to want to throw the ball. They have all the athletes at receiver right now. And Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard can catch the ball in the backfield. I don't know if either of them will get 15 plus touches rushing the ball, though.
Yeah, that's going to be the frustrating thing. I think he's going at a reasonable ADP on all sites, basically 34, 35 across the board. We're a little bit lower on him. That's mainly because in best ball, obviously, you don't have to make roster moves or anything or start sit decisions. So if he has that, big run or all of a sudden 7 receptions, he's going to start for you. So,
Mm-hmm.
and being an RB4, like that's kind of the type of running back that you need, the high risk, but can have those boom weeks. Well, I don't know. I can't envision a scenario where he's my RB3 or 4, and I can comfortably start him and bench other good running backs and feel good about my team.
Right.
And that's kind of where I'm at with him. I'm kind of on the fence. Same with Tony Pollard. He's definitely higher, maybe a little too high in our rankings, but both of them, it's just they're going away from the high volume rushing and going into the high volume passing. That's the environment that they're in. That's what they've invested in when bringing in Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd. Derrick Henry obviously leaving and
Mm-hmm.
not having a great offensive line to begin with. It's a new regime. It's a new quarterback. The style fits what he is good at, but they signed another guy that does the same thing. And they're the same kind of player, don't complement each other well. And I think it's just going to be riding the hot hand. It's just going to be on a weekly basis, a little frustrating.
Yeah. And then we talked about Nick Chubb a little bit. Hopefully he's healthy and we can just enjoy Nick Chubb football because we love to see that. And then Raheem Mostert, he's much lower than consensus. And that has a lot to do with the fact that he has to regress. I know that they're at 26 isn't really necessarily, but he had the most touchdowns last year. He had the most touchdowns combined in 1 year than his whole career this last year. So
Mm-hmm.
that is such a big deal when you have to think about, like, can this guy continue at the pace that he was at? There's no way. He has to come back down to earth, especially in that way.
Right.
And those are
Yeah.
worth 6 points. So,
I mean, last year he had 21 touchdowns, and his first 7 years he had 19. So it's insane. I think he's the Jamal Williams of this draft, and he's going even higher than Jamal Williams was going last year. Last year, in spite of a looming suspension for Kamara, which we thought it might be 6 games, it got reduced down to 3. Either way, Jamal never got into the top 100. He
right.
was staying in the 110s to 120s, and then when they saw 3 game suspension, he kind of dropped about 10 spots, and he
Mm-hmm.
stayed there. Well, Raheem's going in the 6th, 7th round, and that's with another running back on
Added.
Miami that is going in the first 2.5 rounds.
Right.
So I just don't think the pass there that you can start him on a weekly basis. He's going top. Let's see his ADP right now compared to, because like I said, second biggest differential for us. Actually, biggest overall of all running backs on this list. Um, his lowest is RB29. And that's an ESPN, but he's RB24, RB25, RB25. That's your RB2
Mm-hmm.
on your team. And you're going to be comfortable starting him week in and week out. I don't think he's in the David Montgomery camp of just he's the safe floor.
Right.
And, they drafted another running back in Jalen Wright, and people have him going in the first, 11 rounds
Right.
as a
Yeah.
rookie. And I just don't think the path is there for him. He could have the occasional 30-point game, and you might seem like you're wrong, but I don't want to touch him at all right now.
Well, my thing is also, week to week, if he has a 30-point game, his floor is like 5 points, and his ceiling, of course, is ridiculous if he does get that workload. One thing I will say though is, I think Miami wants to get younger, and Raheem Mostert has had injuries in the past. He's much older than the other two running backs in the room. And I think that those two guys probably outpace him at the end of the day. But since he did have such a huge workload last year, we can't be like, oh, Jalen Wright automatically gets the spot. But it's just the opportunity later in the year is more for Jalen Wright than it truly is for Raheem Mostert.
And then also we can't discount, Miami. Several players were on the biggest schedule losers video that we did last month because they have a rough schedule, a lot of cold weather games, and we just kind of saw the run game disappear. And obviously, when you score 8 rushing touchdowns between 2 running backs in one game, that's heavily inflates what he did in the grand scheme of things.
Right.
Outside of that game, he still had 17 touchdowns, sure. But again, I'm not chasing last year's results for a 32-year-old running back.
Fair. And then Zeke, and of course, Zeke coming back from New England. He was actually pretty productive in New England for what we expected. We had a lot of him in best ball.
Yeah.
when he was a free agent still. But his role is kind of known when it comes to Dallas. He's the guy in between or outside the 20s, like 20 to the goal line. He will be in the game. He will be rushing in the short yardages. He will probably get the first down work for the most part, and he's a better pass blocker than Rico Dowdle. So at times he'll be on the field even for that. Um, there's a really high floor for a guy, this late and this old, and something that we just didn't expect maybe with Zeke this year.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas led the league in scoring last year, and usually you want pieces everywhere littered on that offense. I don't expect that to happen again, but they're still going to be one of the 5, 6, 7 highest scoring teams. 6 of the last 9 games are going to be at home. Reasonable schedule. It's very easy to kind of know that they're going to be a 10, 11 win team, as long as Dak's healthy, pretty much. I know that it's probably the worst version of their offensive line than they've had in the last 10 years, probably, but it's still much better than what he dealt with in New England last year. And he, between weeks 12 and 17, when Ramondre went down, RB10. And, that was on an inefficient 3 yards to carry. And,
And at the most important time of the year for fantasy,
yeah, exactly. He was one of our biggest winners, mainly because we thought wherever he went, he would be a goal line S back, or hopefully he can get 12 points in a decent workload. Well, now he signs back to Dallas, and there is no clear cut. I cannot even fathom them saying Rico Dowdle gets 17 touches
right
in a competitive game that's going down to the wire.
No.
If both are healthy.
Yeah.
So as long as they don't sign anybody else, which who knows, maybe Dalvin Cook. Finally, there was rumors last year that Dallas was interested in him. Maybe they go that route, and now it's a true three-headed monster. Maybe he still splits 50-50, but I think he'll get all the important snaps, and that's why we like him so much.
Yeah, exactly. And then moving up to the tier 6, the roller coaster running backs. This is one of the tiers that if you get this tier right, you're going to win a lot of money, most likely.
Right.
But so one thing that stands out to me is the fact that we have Austin Eckler and Brian Robinson in this tier. Separated. You actually have Brian Robinson a whole 0.4 higher than Austin Eckler in regular drafts, but we have him 6 spots higher. I think that has a lot to do with just floor. His floor is way better than Austin Eckler in my eyes. Austin Eckler is the receiving back. Brian Robinson will probably get 18 carries a game as the 1A, with Austin Eckler being the 1B. But yeah, that running back room is an interesting fantasy room.
Yeah, I mean, with Austin Eckler, another year down, he was probably the biggest bust overall last year because he, was the second RB. I think he was going 5th overall.
Yeah, 5th or
last
6th,
year.
Yeah.
I didn't have a single share of him. I was a year early on that because I expected a regression year. He had a terrible year in 2022 when Keenan Allen and Mike Williams went down. But he was, if you remember, had the streak of like 15 targets a game on like a 4 or 5 game stretch.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what really kind of saved those that invested in him. But he still was like the 2nd or 3rd pick in that draft and didn't pan out. Last year was even worse. He goes to Washington, and to me, it's just, I don't even know if he's an upgrade over Antonio Gibson at this point. That's a debatable question. But regardless, even if it is, Brian Robinson did a great job in the important role.
Mm-hmm.
When he did get the goal line carries, he was efficient. He scored well. And that was in spite of being the worst offensive line in football last year, at least pass blocking perspective. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of split right down the middle. Their ADPs, or their ranking consensus wise, 32 and 32.4. Half are ahead of with Austin Eckler. Redraft leagues have ESPN and Yahoo respectively have Brian Robinson at 26 and 28. That's a little rich for me. But, Brian Robinson in best ball drafts right now, going in the 1 teens, and that's RB4 territory, RB5 territory. And I think he could be even with Austin Eckler being healthy, still be RB2.
Right.
Which is why, he's at the top of this tier.
Yeah, and we love the memes of picking the wrong B. Robinson last year, of course, and it panning out. Then you got Chase Brown. He's in a committee with Zach Moss. who is also on this list, about 2 spots ahead of Chase Brown. We're not. So in this room, we really grade talent. Talent is important to us here. And why is Zach Moss so much more talented than Chase Brown? And why do they have 12 difference in ADP when they're on the same team? And who's going to have the workload and who's going to get the passing downs? Well, I don't think it's 12 position differentials that and how it's showing up. I
Mhm.
think this is a much better ranking and how much closer it really is and who could actually be the alpha at the end of the day.
Right. I mean, with Zach Moss, he's kind of going in the top 100 right now. He's, again, by default, the starter. And so that's why a lot of people are so high on him. Some, I believe that's Underdog, has him as RB 24. That's crazy to me. Season long wise, he's never even had that long of a stretch to where he was productive. Last year, he did very well in the 2 weeks went down, but he was behind Deion Jackson. And I know he was dealing with some stuff during training camp as well. But I mean, yeah, he's just kind of very subpar running back. Chase Brown, he was the guy that we liked a lot in the situation they went to because they were the Joe Burrows liked his you know
Yeah.
pass catching running back. Samaje P. Ryan, even before Giovanni Bernard was a top 20 running back one year, when he had a 4-game sample size with Joe Mixon going down. Now Joe Mixon's gone. I don't know who's going to be. I'm assuming Zach Moss is the goal line guy, but I don't know what he's shown to believe that he would be on 2-minute drill and important passing downs. And if we're talking PPR rankings, which these are PPR rankings, I wouldn't argue if you had Chase Brown above Zach Moss. I will give the benefit of the doubt because the important pay dirt for running backs is touchdowns. Zach Moss, way more touchdown upside.
Mm-hmm.
Can't even deny that. But it's much closer than it should be.
I think one thing I will say is, Chase Brown, there was a downgrade at the the number one running back from Joe Mixon to Zach Moss. And then it's his second year. And age matters. I don't
Yep.
know how old Zach Moss is. He feels old.
He feels old, but he's surprisingly 26.
Okay.
So,
Well, there you go.
but still, yeah,
Feels old.
he's an average running back.
Yeah. And I don't see why you just automatically can put him in the top 100 around guys
And
like
right now they're
Najee Harris. And I believe it's just Jalen Warren. He's 1 spot behind basically in rankings. Like, that's kind of stuff that I'm surprised by, I guess.
yeah, I mean, again, we're just kind of overall ADP wise, like Zach Moss going in the top 90 and Chase Brown going like 35, 40 spots later on some platforms. It's way too big of a gap for us. And that's why they're much, much closer than it sees right here.
Yeah. And then Jalen Warren, he's in a 2-headed monster with Najee Harris, Arthur Smith coming in. It's a new regime. Expect more running. Jalen Warren's been very efficient with his rushing opportunities. 29th ranked is running back 2.5, basically, between 2 and 3. So you're getting him at a spot where you're probably not playing him every week. You get an opportunity to pick. And Najee's been injured in the past, so he has opportunities. Depends how Arthur Smith and this new regime sees him, if they think he's the number one guy, because I think that they could. But he does have more upside receiving, and he's more explosive. So
yeah, I mean, Najee, he's been a frustrating cat since his rookie year. I mean, his rookie year, he still had a first round ADP, like or at the 1-2 turn. Had a lot of shares of him. He did fine. I think he was right around RB 10. And then the following 2 years, same time ADP, absolute bust. And then last year, I think he fell to the late third, early fourth, absolute bust. But each of the last 2 years, he still has finished relatively strong, at least RB2-esque. And while that is not nearly what you want when you're investing a top 3 round pick in him, well, now he's going the 7th round or 8th round.
Right.
And
Jalen
Warren, he's going to the same, and basically they're right next to each other. And I think it's kind of split on who people think will be the next guy. What we do know is that more rushing attempts should be going Pittsburgh's way. Obviously, bringing in Atlanta's former head coach, high volume, goal line touches, very inefficient. but Najee's the goal line guy.
Hmm.
And he was getting most of the stuff, whether if it's inefficient or not, whatever. He could be James Conner for all I care. But regardless, James Conner is going to repeatedly get a top 20 finish. And we've missed it on a lot of occasions just because we just don't like the player. Well, Najee's in a contract year. Usually, running backs contract year, we're just going to run into the ground.
Right.
So I don't know. It's an uncomfortable stand that we're taking, and that's why Najee's in the tier above. Which I kind of jumped the curve on that one. But Jalen Warren, if you feel the opposite way because Najee's no good, not going to fault you for it because he has opportunity as well. Just take a stand on one. I think instead of just being even split, because
Right.
why being even split? It's not like they have a easy stretch or easy schedule.
No.
They had to finish, like I said, the season, all 6 division games, and then Kansas City and Philly.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Ridiculously tough schedule. This is more of a first half of the season investment. And if you have Jalen Warren as the guy, go right ahead. But it doesn't make sense to have 20% this guy and 20% that guy when you could just have like 25 or 30% of one and then just let it ride.
I was gonna say, like, my big argument sometimes is, when you spend a first rounder on a guy in the draft and you go get a guy at 24 who is at the position, you need to probably run that guy as much as possible. Well, unfortunately, this is Arthur Smith. We saw him not do that last year in a similar situation with Bijan and Tyler Algier. So that's not necessarily true here. But, normally when you get a first rounder, you expect them to get the bulk of the touches. And that's why, for us, Najee is also higher. But yeah. And then Tony Pollard, just talked about Tyjae Spears, similar guy. We should expect, similar to how we just talked about Jalen Warren and Najee,
Mm-hmm.
we should expect Tony Pollard to be the 1A and get most of the touches. But at the same time, I'm still not comfortable with even this spot for him. I could see him being lower. It's just,
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
weird. It's a weird,
either
weird
way,
guy.
I think the biggest thing is that neither of them are going at a crazy overdraft right now.
Right.
So either way, it's not like it's a high risk pick. I think
Mhm.
people are still salty on Tony Pollard, and his ADP is reflecting it. I mean, he's all the way in basically the 100th pick in best ball drafts right now, and he's way more talented than that. He has all the opportunity to get back to what he could be because last year Dallas wanted him to be in between tackles running back. And I said from the start, it was not going to work because that's not his style. Well, that's not what they're going to be doing this year.
Mhm.
So, he has the opportunity to outperform his ADP. It's just an uncomfortable, similar to Tashi Spears. I just don't know every single week what I'm getting with him. And that's what's going to be a little tough. And then before we move on, just real quick tidbit Trey Benson, he's behind James Conner. James Conner has always frustrated us, like we said, but he's always been a top 20-esque running back in terms of fantasy football. Well, that was also because they never really invested draft capital into a
Right.
really good backup or a future plan. Well, Trey Benson, 3rd-round pick, he was our number 1 running back in the class. And I think he's a late round potential league winner.
Right.
And that's why we like him so much and why he's in that tier instead of the handcuff tier.
Well, I think also with Trey Benson, one thing that we pointed out when we did all of our rankings is his explosiveness. I don't remember the exact number, but he had a super high percentage of 15 plus yard gains. Most of his touchdowns came on 15 plus yard gains. He disappears sometimes, but that's okay when he's the backup. You just have
Right.
James Conner go out there and get 15 rushes. But I don't think this is the first guy that gives James Conner a problem at staying on the field. And that has not happened for James Conner in a while.
Yeah, since he's been at Arizona, it's really not because they've done the Keontae Ingrams of the world, and after Kenyon Drake left, that was what they really did. Chase Edmonds,
Yeah.
like just below average scat backs, undersized, that can't really compete with goal line touches, and James Conner, very solid pass catcher as well.
Mm-hmm.
So now you got a more explosive athlete. So maybe sometimes you just don't want the grind into the dirt 3 yards. I want the guy that can go and take it to the house. Trey Benson's that guy.
Right.
So that's why we like him. But yeah, moving on, uncomfortable RB2s.
Yeah.
That's basically the easiest way to put these guys. We touched a little bit on Najee. Again, we're taking a little bit of a stand. That's why he's RB21. He's capable of finishing that. But again, if I draft him in redraft, I'm not very comfortable with it.
Right, of
Same
course.
with any of these other guys. Most of them in bad situations or on bad teams. I mean, Pittsburgh, we think is the most talented overall team or
Mhm.
contending for a winning record. But again, rough stretch to end the season. Najee's just, and he's has a really solid backup nipping at his heels.
Right,
So
of
you don't know
course.
if he's going to have the guaranteed workload. Ramondre is one of the guys that we took a stand on last year, and that didn't pan out. Well, he's a guy that is a very good, in the passing game as well. Well, they signed a purely pass catching backup. I don't know how that really hurts him or helps him, but
Mhm.
he's going at a seventh, eighth round.
Yeah,
It's all
reasonable.
all these guys low risk. James Conner we touched on as well. Javonte Williams. People are trying to put Jaleel McLaughlin over him. Ridiculous. But again, even if we do think that's ridiculous, he's not in a great situation. He's not going to get 20 touches a game.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
just going to be a lot of highs and lows.
Yeah, and out of those few guys we just talked about, Javonte Williams is the most interesting to me because like I'm a guy that will die on the hill to bet on talent. And if you were, I know you remember, Javonte Williams was my number one running back in that class, and to say that he has the talent, and now it's like now he feels very J.K. Dobbins esque though because he has that injury. But I'm going to bet on a guy that I'm very confident in. I believe that was the Najee Harris class. So, I had him over Najee talent wise, even. And when he does play and he is healthy, he's really good at football. So,
yeah, if I remember correctly, I think he's the year after because this is
okay.
his third year. But regardless, either way, like it's an uncomfortable that. But again, when you invest in running backs with coming off ACLs, historically, it's better to invest in him the second year. And obviously, Brees Hall was RB2 overall last year. It was the outlier, but the first half of the season, he was giving you nothing. And so you had to hope that you had good depth because he finished the year strong. The last few weeks of the year was atop the league in touches and just had 30 carries a game and 10
Right.
receptions or 10 targets and just putting up ridiculous numbers. And they're in uncompetitive games and ugly, 17-3 games, but he still has 200 yards and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Well, typically, like I said, second year off ACL is where you want to target. Javonte Williams, that's exactly where he's at. He's going to be ready for camp. He's doing all these things, and don't believe the Jaleel McLaughlin stuff. We did talk about Audric Estime, who is a very quick.
He's our handcuff.
He's a great handcuff, but that doesn't mean that we think, oh, draft one and not the other.
Right.
Javonte Williams, his ADP is dropping right now, and we think
I love that.
that's kind of
I'm excited.
rough. We haven't really gotten enough of him, and we're going to probably start to because he's falling into the 110s. And then
Trey Benson and him are in the same range, and we know that Javonte will be the number one. I will tell you who was in that draft class: Travis Etienne, Najee Harris, Chuba Hubbard, Ramondre, Javonte Williams.
Okay, he wasn't.
Yeah, Kenneth Gainwell, Elijah Mitchell. Those guys were in there. So
he's really a fourth year.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it was the injury. I bet it was the injury that messed it up. But yeah, so and then DeAndre Swift, we've had a lot of conversations about him during drafts. I just feel it feels like a committee, especially if they could keep Khalil Herbert. We've talked about Khalil Herbert possibly not being there. But at the same time, like if he is there, it's a lot of mouths to feed in the backfield, and they're going to be throwing the ball a lot. So his ADP kind of reflects that for us, and that's why he's not in the next range, in the next tier.
Yeah, I mean, in spite of finishing pretty strong last year with Philly, he in the second half of the year, week 9 through 17, RB29, and he wasn't getting goal line looks. He wasn't that efficient. He wasn't getting a ton of receptions. I will say it's a much better situation for him. If you're talking, there's not really a goal line threat from the quarterback perspective. So you're really just competing with other running backs, which is a good thing. And then, Caleb Williams throwing to his running backs is a lot more likely than Jalen Hurts.
Right. With Marshawn Lloyd was the running back at USC with Caleb Williams, and he had a big season.
Exactly. So Yeah, that was a great point. So, yeah, the problem with Swift, like we said, it's going to be some kind of committee. It's not going to be just him getting all the workload, and I think there's going to be a lot more lows than people anticipate investing in RB2 in. And it's not like we think it's crazy. We have him obviously 25th overall in our rankings, so we're getting him some respect. But yeah, I just I don't see the RB1 upside where
Well,
he's going right now.
one thing you were saying was, you think that he might get the goal line work as a player. When he played for the Lions, he wasn't the goal line back. He never got any goal line
Yep.
touches. And Javante Williams, I'm sorry, not Javante Williams, Jamal Williams broke had the most touchdowns that year. So, that's another concern. Maybe he's not capable inside the 5 yard line. And they go Roshan or they go Khalil Herbert or even, what is it, Travis Homer or somebody because they just have a better chance of punching it in than DeAndre Swift. So he makes me worried. And that's why he's in the uncomfortable RB2s. That makes sense. Jonathan Brooks, a guy that's coming off an ACL tear, always makes you worried. First year back off ACL wasn't as bad as some of the guys that we've had in the past, but it's still an ACL. And adding him around this range, he might not start the year. We expect him to, but there are chances that he does not come out week one, and makes him he's just a little. You have to worry with him a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it just kind of depends on what you're looking for. Are you looking for something to start the year off strong, or are you looking for a late round gem,
Mm-hmm.
late season winner, right? So again, there's been a RB1 as a rookie seemingly every year that we've been doing this, about 8 years in a row, and I can go back even further to try to elaborate on that. But RB rookie running backs are killers for volume. Problem with him coming off ACL injury, and first half of the year is going to be kind of rough. I kind of compared a little bit, not nearly as talented, but Todd Gurley. His rookie year coming in very slow, splitting touches, didn't have a lot of opportunities. And then he really started to turn it on at the end of his rookie year and then finished as a top 20 running back. Jonathan Brooks is equivalent of that to me. We've talked about how easy their schedule is, and we're investing a lot in Carolina, and we're being different than most people because right now his ADP is in the hundreds. Kind of jumped up a little bit for some platforms. ESPN for some reason starts him off at 68, which is pretty crazy of a difference. I don't know why it's a 40 pick difference, but yeah, if he's your RB3 and you go double hero, you go one yearly one, and then
Yeah,
a mid-round running back with
Ramondre.
the following tier that we're about to talk about. You don't have to have the instant production, but late in the year, he should start to kind of really gain some momentum and then possibly be a playoff winner for you.
Right. And then let's jump up to the next tier, tier 4. It's the feels good on paper, has paths to disappointment. David Montgomery. Lions have a two-headed monster, 1A, 1B. We know what their roles are. The touchdown vulture will be David Montgomery. He will score the touchdowns at the end of the day. And so I think that opportunity is there for him to have a high upside because of it, high floor. Aaron Jones on his new team in Minnesota. He should basically walk in and be the best running back in the room, no problem. No, and then jumping up Zamir White, he's a guy we're actually higher on. We like Zamir White a lot. I mean, he's a Raider. I like that a lot, of course, but at the same time, like he's going to get all the opportunities. He is the best running back in the room, I believe, but Alexander Madison is a little scary, just a little. Kenneth Walker III, Seattle has basically ran him to the ground. He's been their best guy. I don't see it changing in any way. And then Derrick Henry going to the Baltimore Ravens. This is one of our biggest differences. I don't know if it's the biggest, but
in terms of overall ADP, it is the biggest difference. It's the second biggest negative differential
for running backs
behind Raheem Mostert.
Gotcha. So yeah, all these guys though fit on this tier. Let's start with David Montgomery and work way up though.
Yeah, so he to me is as safe as you can get. He is going to every week get you 10 to 13, and it basically will take his upside is not 150 yards,
Right.
25 touches anymore, I don't think. It's more so 13 carries, 60 yards, 3 touchdowns,
Mm-hmm.
which is not many people can say they have that realm of outcomes. Um, he's going right around where we think he should be going in the 6th round. It just kind of depends on where you're looking for, but we like him a lot. Last year, he finished the second half of the year, weeks 9 through 17, was RB16, and that was in spite of Jameer Gibbs being RB6.
Mm-hmm.
So Jameer started to hit his stride, get more touches, yet he still averaged 5 yards a carry and had 6 touchdowns.
And they love him. The
And they love
Lions
him,
love
and
him.
that was in spite of missing some games also.
Yeah.
So again, 10 to 13, 14 points a game is what you're looking for. He's not going to provide a ton in the pass game, so that's a little bit of a dip on him as well. But I like him a lot.
Underdog. He's one of the guys that you probably could get a lot of because of the fact of their scoring half PPR. He doesn't have as much. He can make up for it with his opportunities.
And we've talked about like sometimes like a style of play fits better for like a certain fantasy platform than others. So like PPR, like I told you, Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Right.
It's interesting how he's a PPR like
And he's
target king,
higher on
and he's
Underdog.
higher on Underdog. So David Montgomery is a half PPR more catered to, right? Well, Underdog has him lower than DraftKings.
Well, there
I
you
don't
go.
get it. I don't get that. But also,
Take advantage of it, everybody.
also ESPN and Yahoo, obviously, again, these are way too early to even put any credibility in these ADPs. But Yahoo has him 49th.
Mm-hmm.
So that is at the 4-5 turn. That's probably way too early for me. ESPN has him at 64, much more reasonable, but it makes more sense because PPR versus half PPR.
Right, of course.
He should be ranked lower. So either way, he feel good about him. Aaron Jones is an interesting one just because I don't know. He never can put together over the last couple seasons put together a consistent year throughout the year, whether that be injury, down play, what have you. But he finished the year really strong last year, 4 straight games, 100 rushing yards, and then Green Bay makes the move to sign Josh Jacobs, and then it's like, oh, it's gonna be a 2-headed monster. Oh no, we're gonna cut you. And so him in a pissed off mood says, no, I'm going to Minnesota and I'm gonna beat your ass. So
do we bet on talent here is the real question. I think we do because there's really no one that challenges him in that backfield. He actually has a similar backfield to what he was in prior. The problem is he going to stay healthy?
Yep.
Is his team going to be good enough? Because Minnesota not necessarily looking super hot with what they've got. Of course, they have good players, but their quarterback situation is really rough right now. Unless you're really betting on Sam Darnold, which we don't have him in our top 25.
Mm-hmm.
So he's an interesting guy. I really like the talent, but I just don't know the consistency is going to be there.
Yeah, that's basically where we're at with him. He's a very polarizing guy. I can see him for a stretch being a top 10 running back and then just kind of being either an afterthought or having to deal with injuries once again. I mean, he is 29,
right?
Going on 30 this year. He'll turn 30 in December. But again, all these guys except for Derrick Henry, very reasonable ADPs right now. These are the guys that are going in the 6th, start of the 7th round. Fantastic RB2 options for you. We'll talk about Zamir White a little bit. I talked about in an earlier video. I don't know. There's always a guy that just you think he'll get opportunity, so he's going to be pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, Zamir is the only guy in the top 20 that has not done it in a full workload.
Right, of course.
And you're projecting. And Alexander Madison last year was that guy. He was going in the 5th, 6th round. Minnesota got rid of Dalvin Cook, and by default, he was the only guy. Didn't really sign anybody, so that's why he went there, and he shit the bed. Well, the irony, he goes to the Raiders, and now Zamir White. You would think he wouldn't be challenged, but it could very well be a situation where he just underwhelms or is not efficient or just loses touches as the season goes on. We'll see. He did really well to end the season. Had a lot of volume, which is always good. Not huge in the target department,
right? Of course,
but getting 18 to 20 carries, being a 7th round pick, I'm more than okay with.
Right, and then Kenneth Walker, he's just going to continue doing his thing. I think that the range that he's going in makes sense just because injury history, of course, is a thing, and then also like it's just is Seattle going to be a good offense?
Hmm.
I mean, they have the pieces, but are they going to actually be able to put it all together? Geno Smith, is he going to be able to come back to form? Things like that. But Kenneth Walker, they're going to run him 18 times a game, and he could get 3 targets, maybe. He's not really a target guy, maybe 2.5, but he's going to get the volume rushing the ball. Also a guy, these last three, Kenneth Walker, Zamir White, Dave Montgomery, even Derrick Henry, all much better in half PPR. So keep that
Yes.
in mind. But yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
the big thing.
I talked earlier when we've done in best ball videos that Kenneth Walker we haven't really gotten enough of.
Right.
I don't know if it's because of just going in other directions because we did a lot of hero running back or zero RB. But I've started to gain a little bit of interest in shares of him. He's going very reasonable range right now, and he's a guy that can also break one.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just kind of depending on your taste and how you're going because he's riding the smack dab middle of the RB dead zone this year, which
Mm-hmm.
is RB or rounds 4 through 6. He's probably going around later than he should be on best ball. Obviously, 63rd and 65th overall. He's a round and a half, 2 rounds earlier on ESPN and Yahoo. Do you want to spend a 4th round pick on him? Again, that's a bigger discussion later on, but we like him a lot. Basically, everybody has him 17th overall, which is pretty fun.
Yeah.
And then Derrick Henry, like we said, one of the biggest differentials negatively. We're just taking a stand that he's just going to have an inefficient but just high touchdown year. I mean, everybody that we've seen with Lamar Jackson, high opportunity for touchdowns, whether it was Mark Ingram, Gus Edwards, what we thought was J.K. Dobbins, but nobody's been a true consistent throughout the full season RB1, and he's going 8th overall in front of guys like Josh Jacobs, Travis Etienne, all guys that are younger, all guys that provide something in PPR. He's not going to be on the field and passing downs. He'll get a lot of goal line carries. He should get 15 touchdowns this year, but it could be 700, 800 yards
Right.
on the ground, and it could just be inefficient. Last year, Gus Edwards had 13, like I said. The second half of the year, he had 8 touchdowns, but 4 yards a carry, not that impressive, especially when Lamar takes less pressure off you. And also, he was RB25.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a similar profile or outlook that I have for Derrick Henry. Baltimore's doesn't have that easy of a schedule.
No, nobody in that division
I just
does.
don't feel comfortable, especially with him as RB1 in every single platform other than us. That's where he's at. I think he's a solid RB2, but if he's your number 1 running back, I'm not that comfortable with your team.
Right. And then we'll move up to the third tier here. The good upside of great value picks. This is starting basically the running back dead zone is in this area. All these guys kind of sit there. Joe Mixon getting traded for a 7th-round pick to go to the Houston Texans, getting paid. So they believe that he's the guy, and he's sitting, one spot basically versus ADP differential farther back for us. I think that, there's a lot of mouths to feed here, and that's my big thing.
Yeah, so with Joe Mixon, he when earlier in the offseason, we had a friend that asked, where is he going to be? What's his ADP range? And we hadn't even started making these lists or anything. And I was like, he's probably going to be around RB15 because we know he's going to get a workload.
Mm-hmm.
He has 10 touchdown upside on a high-scoring offense, just like he was in Cincinnati last year. Nothing's changed except for the logo on his helmet.
Right.
So he's RB15. I know we're 1 spot below, but that's mainly because ESPN has him as RB11. Everybody else has him as 14 or 15.
Mm-hmm.
So we're right where consensus is. Going in the 5th round, sometimes you can give him in the 6th. Perfectly fine with him as RB2. He's one of the safer running backs in the RB2 range just because he's got the guaranteed volume. Not a ton of, obviously, Dameon Pierce. Maybe he could be better as a backup than he is as a starter. Yeah, I like him a lot. No problems with him whatsoever.
Yep. And then Rachaad White, the not so efficient PPR king. Tampa Bay, Baker Mayfield enjoys throwing the ball to his running backs. So you're going to automatically get that. And then Rachaad White is going to get basically all the touches. They bring in Bucky Irving to be his backup. Same player, same guy.
Exactly.
So it's like I expect 65 to 70% of the snaps going to Rashad White. So you're going to get the floor. Volume is king. Doesn't matter how efficient you are most of the time. And as long as he is continuing to score touchdowns, he'll probably be in this range.
Yeah, in PPR, like these are PPR rankings. He's arguably too low. Maybe we might prefer him based on his ADP compared to other guys, because somebody like Devallard and Achan, who's going in the second round, and him, it's a pick 'em to me almost, and it's about 4 round difference depending on the site that you're on. He was RB2 overall last year between weeks 9 and 17. And again, I keep referencing the second half of the season. I'm building a strong roster to where I'm expecting to make the playoffs, make a big run, and waiver wire stuff can take care of any kind of bad draft decisions that I make or injuries that I may suffer.
Right,
You know,
of
we
course.
can figure it out. We're looking for upside late in the year. RB2 overall last year on Tampa Bay, one of the least efficient running games, second straight year, less than 4 yards a carry. Doesn't matter. He had 8 touchdowns, 36 targets, just crazy volume. And he doesn't have much competition. So, again, one of the safer picks that you can get. He's right around the range. It just kind of depends on your flavor and cup of tea.
Yep. And then Isaiah Pacheco, kind of takes off for the Chiefs in the last couple of years. CH is still there, but Isaiah Pacheco going he's between 10 and 11 ranked wise. I think he's probably a little higher than we have him. We have some other guys that are way ahead of ADP, so he had to just be the guy that dropped. But solid player, going to get every rushing opportunity, I feel like. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of points per game, that same stretch, weeks 9 through 17, he had 17.3 points a game, RB5 in that category. There's not a lot wrong with him. He's very efficient. He runs harder than any running back I've seen in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have his CH is his only competition. Jarrett McKinnon always was a vulture. In his tenure with Kansas City, he's no longer there. So, you doing it?
Yeah, I'm good. Go.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, so no longer there, and he just has all that upside in the world. He's very safe, 15 to 17 upside. Don't know how much higher that is. And then also with Kansas City having an improved pass catching unit, presumably, I don't know how much that'll eat into his, important touches. If Patrick Mahomes gets back to 5,000 yards, I don't think that benefits Pacheco at all. I don't
Right,
think he's
of
the
course.
style of running back that's, oh yeah, I'm also gonna, get 450 catches and 4 or 5 receiving touchdowns as well.
Right.
I don't think that's his scheme, but if they continue to struggle, I think he reaps the biggest benefits on that roster.
Right. And then next, the Saints PPR king, Alvin Kamara, guy that could get, at times 10 plus targets. We have him a lot higher versus consensus at +4. And when you get closer to the 1, that's a big jump. And so big thing with him is, he's a little older, making sure he stays healthy. He's not playing on the best team in the world. And so those are the concerns. But if you have Alvin Kamara and you get him in the range that he's going, you are very happy.
Yeah. So he missed 3 games last year. And then week 4 on, he was RB3 overall. Points per game, 17.9. Fantastic. Inefficient rushing, under 4 yards a carry. He's been that. Led the league in receptions in that stretch.
Right.
With 75. And he is a year older. And Kendra could eat into his workload. But he's going the 7th round.
Yep. It's cool.
Crazy. And obviously, if I remember correctly, his overall ADP, let me pull that up real quick. So he's actually much higher on ESPN, 30th overall, which that's kind of flirting with where the RB12 should be, right? But Underdog 71, and I've seen him fall later. DraftKings 60, and it's a lot of times you can get him past 60,
right?
Because of other people investing in. It's just too low, and I think people are, I don't get Raheem Mostert staying as high as he is and presuming, age isn't a factor for him, or James Conner staying where he is. But Kamara, he's 29. Let's drop him way down.
I agree.
Doesn't make sense. So he's our RB1 or he's in the RB1 range because he has that kind of upside. He's as safe as can be, and if you stack him with Kendre Miller, that is the perfect way to implement, handcuffs.
I mean, he's the best player on his team. Like when it comes to offensively, getting the ball to somebody, you want to get the ball to him. And so they scheme things for him just to, catch screens and do all these weird things because they need the ball in his hands as much as possible. And he's just a little low. And that's okay with us because we're just going to take advantage of it.
Yep.
And then going next, Devon Achan, one guy that, you have to really think about when you're drafting because this guy is going super high. And not only that, make sure when you get him in best ball, best ball is the site where you really want him over everything, ESPN and Yahoo, whatever. But best ball is where you want to get him. You have to go and find some safer like options later on because of it. He's going to get 30 points randomly, but he's also going to get 5. And you just have to know that that's coming and be ready to and prepared to have your team reflect a way to get 10, 12 points on those 5-point games. So,
yeah, I mean, as much as we did, go against the Raheem Mostert and why he's one of the lowest in terms of consensus, he is purely just the spark or boom play. I mean, shoot, we look at his stats. It's pretty mind-boggling because this is a college number, right? Yards rushing per game between weeks 3 and 17. He averaged 8 yards a carry. 20 plus yard runs. That was 6 more than the next highest guy. And he missed time. So the boom is there. And his ADP is reflecting it. And he is the pure example of best ball versus redraft.
oh yeah,
Because his ADP, rank wise, right? He's 7th in both DraftKings and Underdog, right? Well, in ESPN and Yahoo, 15 and 13. So they view him as an RB2. He probably is an RB2. I would not be the most comfortable with him as my RB1 just because you will see injury risk.
right.
You
Of
could
course.
see touchdowns vultured. I mean, it's a realm of outcomes where they score 40 points and he's not involved in any of them because they just have so many mouths to feed. But there's games where he could be the pure reason that they score 40 points.
Exactly.
We saw them score 70, and in spite of Raheem Mostert, 4 touchdowns, he still had 8 20-yard runs in that one game and 4 touchdowns himself. So he has all the upside in the world, but just a little bit more risk. So the thing is, when you're strategizing with these best ball drafts that we've been doing a lot of times when you invest running backs early, you want about 6 or 7. And if you invest in the first 3 rounds, probably don't want to touch one for the next 3 or 4 because you wanted a ton of just load up on receiver. Well, if I drafted Devon Achan, he's probably more of a robust strategy or just doubling down early with like a Bijan and Brees and then snagging him in the second and then just I don't got to touch it for about 10 rounds.
Right.
That's kind of more idealistically where I have him. But I mean, if you're talking overall ranking, right? He's going in the 4th round on ESPN and Yahoo. Very, very fine with that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then going up, James Cook. He's the Buffalo running back. They do draft Ray Davis and get basically a backup. Could vulture some goal line touches because he's the bigger guy, but James Cook is going to probably have to be the 3rd best receiver on the team. It's like he's going to have to play a lot in the passing game. He's going to have to catch some balls. He's going to probably get 15 rushes a game. He has a really good ceiling and a above average floor, I believe, and he's 3.5 spots higher for us. So
I just think he's in line for a lot of important touches. The only problem is Josh Allen will potentially lead the league in rushing touchdowns.
Right, of course.
And so he had 15 last year and is just obviously we did our quarterback video. If you wanted to check that out, he's our QB1 this year. Despite losing Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, it's because of what he brings on the ground as well. That kind of bites into James Cook, but there's just not a ton of competition. Ray Davis doesn't really immediately take anything from him, and he played all 17 games last year. He was a slow burn, but then started to gain some momentum towards the end of the season. And again, they lost a lot of pieces on their offense, and he's the one consistent guy that they relied on towards the end of the season. Him and Kincaid feast, and that's why their ADP reflects that right now.
Right. And then Josh Jacobs, Green Bay's brand new running back, pretty shiny thing, all around type of running back. He's much lower for some reason. Some places have him outside RB1 range, and it's very surprising to me because I don't see a realm where if he's healthy, he's not an RB1. Like, because he's not getting. Marshawn Lloyd isn't taking rushes from him. He might take some passing down stuff, but Josh Jacobs is going to get all the goal line work, all the important touches. He'll be on 2-minute drills even. Like, yes, Marshawn Lloyd is a thing, but Josh Jacobs can do everything. So I don't see why he's not as high or even higher than this.
Yeah, I mean, so he was RB1 overall in 2022, and then his ADP just skyrocketed to early second round, and a lot of interest was there to draft him because it's like this guy was just the top guy. Why is he going in the second round? And I mean, he was just kind of unspectacular. I mean, 3.5 yards a carry wasn't great in a contract year. Most times when people get their contract year, they just get fed all the workload and all the touches. Well, he just kind of stayed steady. He never really had a stretch where he just knocked it out of the park.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, and weeks 15 through 17, he missed. So if you made the playoffs, you couldn't use him unless you stacked Zamir White or waiver wired him and were able to get the exact same type of workload. So I mean, he just wasn't spectacular last year, and 13.9 points a game for a running back in PPR, it's not great. And now he goes to Green Bay. Not a ton of, like you said, important volume will all go his way, but I think people are just a little scared off just because he didn't make the most of his opportunity last year.
Right, and I think that's fair, but now he has all the opportunity in the world, so he's going to get the volume. Volume is king. Top 12 guy. Don't even know. I just don't overthink it, guys. In my book. And then Travis, moving up to the next one, stat category leading upside. Guys that can have the most touchdowns this year, most rushing touchdowns, most rushing yards, most receiving yards, all the things. Travis Etienne, he's just been one of the guys that we weren't expecting to be as good maybe last year. Personally, I wasn't, and he just made me shut my mouth very very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, he finished overall RB2, 269 points, just under 17 a game. Really, most of that came in the first half of the year because they started off strong, 7-3, and then just littered with injuries. And can't really blame him for falling to RB23 for the second half of the season. But right now, his ADP is just so strange to me. He's not an RB1 in many of the, or he's just kind of fringe RB1, right around 10 for most teams. And we just think he deserves to be in the second tier of running backs. Again, like we said, there's potential he could lead the world, lead the league in carries or opportunities, just because Tank Bigsby just was a non-factor last year, and so they have just realized, oh no, he's exactly going to get everything. And he missed his entire rookie season, but he's also, in the Najee Harris class,
right?
So they're going to be riding him these last year or so, depending on how long they invest in him. He isn't the youngest of running backs. He came in at 23 as a rookie, so he, as long as he's healthy, should be high volume, high opportunity on an offense that should be very, very solid.
Right. And then Kyron Williams, we talked about him earlier. If he is healthy, Sean McVay wants to give him every rush, every touch, every snap. So don't be surprised if, Kyron gets, you don't even see Blake Corum, during the games. Kyron Williams is going to be a guy that they're going to ride till he can't go no more. And that's actually the biggest problem, is he might, get injured because of that style. But that's okay.
Yeah, he had an ankle sprain, so he missed some time last year. And really, it's always a welcome sight when somebody goes down. That's again kind of going back a little bit to Josh Jacobs, and the little concern with him is that as soon as he went down, Zamir White took the ball and ran with it.
Right.
Literally. Kyron went down for a 3-week stretch, and the Royce Freeman and
Darnell Henderson was still there.
Darrell Henderson
Darrell
Jr.
Henderson, yeah.
just were absolute awful.
Yeah.
Absolutely awful. And you saw a big drop off. And this is not a high draft pick.
No.
Somebody that was highly invested in, or we knew that they were going to give him the ball. Like, he was an undrafted player, and he was just that guy. And so essentially, he led the league in points per game last year overall, weeks 9 through 17, 24 points a game.
Yep.
And yet people are just kind of forcing a push down to the third round and trying to rise up Blake Corum like, oh, he's gonna take away from opportunities. That's not on my radar.
They've never done that. Todd Gurley, when he
Mhm.
was there, they gave him 250 plus rushes. Like, it's like whenever Sean McVay gets a guy, that's his guy,
Yeah.
and they're gonna run him into the ground. Devon Achan's ahead of him in best ball. Makes sense, but at the same time, you have so much more consistency when it comes to Kyron, touches wise, touchdown wise, all of it. So yeah, I really think Kyron, should be in this range, even higher than he is, even, and that's
basically overall he's kind of right where we think. His overall rank is 17, and he's top 15 pick in redraft leagues, but in DraftKings and Underdog, he fell mid to the late second round, late third round actually. It's kind of started to creep back up a little bit because the Q tag isn't on his name anymore.
Yeah.
But he, to me, is one of my favorite players based on his range that he's going right now.
Yeah, and then jumping over to Saquon, he's the new face of the Eagles. He's everybody got paid. Everybody there got paid. So the Eagles are going to stay together for a little while, but Saquon is definitely an upgrade versus any running back they've had.
Yes.
My worry, I guess, in Philly is they like going committee, and are they going to just let Saquon be Saquon? But when Saquon is healthy and is running, he's very good at football. There's a lot of options. They spread out the defenses really well. And another problem is he could be vultured by Jalen Hurts. We talked about Josh Allen earlier. Jalen Hurts kind of does the same thing. So that's another concern. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with Saquon, I think in this tier, he has the highest risk. And it's mainly purely because there's just so many mouths to feed in Philly. Like, they extended both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And Dallas Goedert's under contract. And Jalen Hurts has 10 to 15 touchdown upside on the ground. And obviously, like you said, way, way higher upgrade for the Miles Sanders to Swift and then now to Saquon. He should flirt with leading the league in rushing yards.
Yeah.
However, touchdown wise, right? Because usually RB1s flirt with 20 touchdowns, 15 to 20 touchdowns. And I just don't see a path to where he gets over 10, and at least on the ground. And so that's going to have to require a lot of, big plays, big chunk gains on screens, or just breaking runs. Perfectly capable of doing it. But I just don't think he has, when they get inside the 5-yard line, every single possession, they're going to go to Saquon.
Yeah.
And that's a little concerning to me. And, he's safe. He's fine. I just think that I kind of prefer a lot of other guys where they're going currently.
Fair enough. And then Jonathan Taylor, he's right where we have him, five across the board, basically. JT going into this year, he could also have the poaching by Anthony Richardson if Anthony Richardson can find a way to stay healthy. And, my big thing with JT is he's possibly the best running back in football, just ability wise. Will he get the 20 plus touches like he had in the past? Is he a 15 to 18 guy on this team? But truly, he should get every touch, every running touch. So I don't worry about their backups. I'm not really nervous about them. So
not at all. Yeah, like, even though we considered Zach Moss average, like, they downgraded hard after him this year. Sure. Like, they're investing in Trey Sermon, who's on his fourth team, and Evan Hull, who has one game in his career, 2 snaps, or 2 touches rather. He's a guy that we just don't. It's a pure projection just because he had so little snaps. Obviously, he missed the first 4 games of the year due to injury slash holdout, whatever you want to call it. And then as soon as he gets back, Anthony Richardson goes down in the first quarter. So they really only have one true series together, and we just don't know how it's going to work. It could very well be the risk that Saquon and James Cook have with Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, respectively. But we also don't know with Anthony Richardson, and we had him lower on our rankings just because we think it's a lot higher risk. I just don't know where to put him, but we're riding on talent, putting him above a guy like Kyron or Saquon. And if you wanted to put either over him, wouldn't fault you whatsoever. We love him as a talent. He was a former number 1 running back overall, former first round draft pick, and then he had back-to-back years where he's dealing with injuries. And so people are not as high on him, but guess what? Christian McCaffrey had back-to-back years of injuries. People were off him. And then all of a sudden now nobody wants to fade him as the first pick.
Well, yeah,
So that
absolutely.
it's just, you can't always just rely on, last year, yeah,
Right.
he's so young. He's still fresh. Nothing that he's dealt with was a significant ACL,
Right, of course.
Achilles, long-term injury, knock on wood. It's ankle sprains.
Yeah.
It's shoulder injuries. It's back. Like, nothing is a significant to where he was out for 9 months because of a surgery or something like that. It's no concern like that. It's just purely, what is it going to look like with Anthony Richardson? I don't know. But they've got a reasonable second half of the year. And right now, you get him as a second-round pick, and he has number 1 overall running back upside.
Right. And then next is Jahmyr Gibbs, the second part of the two-headed monster in Detroit. A guy that, should get more rushing opportunities and is the passing receiving back for them. He's a very explosive guy, but the problem is, he has his floor at times can be lower than other guys, and that's his biggest issue. He could get 8 points instead of but his upside is crazy. He could get 30 points, no problem. So that's the thing that scares me with him. But he is very efficient, very good running back, and yeah, he just fits what they do.
Yeah, so really, he was a guy that really frustrated fantasy owners early on because they just were feeding all the important touches to David Montgomery.
Yeah.
Like, I specifically remember the season opener against Kansas City. It seemed like every single play was a handoff in between tackles to David Montgomery. They didn't even put Jahmyr on the field as a threat. It was a slow burn. I mean, it makes all the sense in the world that it was when they invested in David Montgomery. They've had a track record of, heavy goal line back, just hard-nosed football as their primary threat of a running back. And then David kind of got banged up. That's really where he started to open up. I mean, week 7 through 17 finished as RB3 overall in terms of both points per game and overall. Tons of targets, a lot of touchdowns. He started to basically split with David Montgomery in the second half of the year in terms of goal line touches. David Montgomery had a little bit more, but I mean, he had the second most touchdowns, 9 touchdowns in that, or 10 touchdowns in that stretch, 9 rushing. And I think the best is yet to come. And so right now he is at the pure 1-2 turn. And really, there's only one way to get him, is if you're on the back end of the first round. And unless you want to reach, if you believe in him over Bijan or Brees, cool, but you got to reach on him.
Right.
But he's not going to fall to you if you're past the 15th pick.
Oh, no.
So that's just kind of where he is. Love him a lot. It'll be interesting in terms of auction drafts, how much he'll be going for, because I think he could be a little bit of a boom or a bust in terms of just see if somebody falls in love with him and then spends over $60. So, but we'll get into that tangent later.
And then let's group these next two guys together, basically going at the same exact spot, kind of pick your poison here. Bijan Robinson and Brees Hall, both of them are really solid running backs, pass game, rushing, super efficient. They also both have solid backups behind them, both Braylon Allen and Tyler Algier. So these guys are very similar, and you just have to kind of pick the guy that you think, will get the touches, and both of them really will. It's just, how do you just pick one of them. It's truly one of those things,
You flip a coin,
Yeah, because
and then
both.
be happy either way.
Yeah, right.
That's essentially
It's
what I
like,
put it. The Jet, I think if you want to just kind of decipher a little bit of a tiebreaker, the reason we have Bijan over Brees is purely schedule.
oh yeah,
They have the easiest schedule by far in the NFL this year. We talked about in our schedule release video, and they're projected to win a bunch of games, score over 20 points a game. I think Brees Hall, he really did a lot of positive things, but it's hard to just invest in the Jets right now. You just don't know. Aaron Rodgers is doing a lot of weird things off the field, and there's already just too much nonsense already. And Atlanta, the only nonsense is, is Kirk going to come back from his Achilles injury?
right.
And if he doesn't, it does not matter because Atlanta has one of the best offensive lines in football. All they have to do is give him the touches. It's not like he played bad at all last year. He was a very, very good running back. He just was tied for fourth on the team in goal line carries.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And they by far had the least efficient. They were under 50% conversion rate on a goal line carry last year. By far the worst. Let him have the ball and let him go to work.
And
And I promise he'll flirt with being RB1 overall.
Right.
If he
And
does.
they've been talking about giving him the ball more, which is finally it's like, my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just think between these two guys, it's
either one.
Impossible to
They're
pick.
They're going to be right next to each other all year. Just pick one and be happy.
Yeah.
If you're going to go that route.
And then we have one more tier, and it's tier 1. It's the he's him tier.
Yep.
Christian McCaffrey. We can't really say much more than that. I mean, the guy has just been electric when he's on the field, and he's can do it every which way. And I don't see a world where San Francisco doesn't want to give him the ball 20 times a game, unless they're winning by 50, like they could,
Mm-hmm.
Lots of talent, lots of mouths to feed, but the first mouth that's getting the ball is this guy right here. He's going to get all the touches. He has no issues with people behind him, because when he comes in, he could go for 20 yards all of a sudden, on his one touch that he got in the third, what I mean? Like, he just, every time he touches the ball, you're like, grab the seat, like, get ready, something cool is going to happen. So
yeah, I mean, across the board, nobody's different. He's one overall. He's one top running back, and he deservedly is. And there's no reason to not put him there. He's as safe as it gets. He has as much upside as it gets. His league touch leading upside, can't even speak right because of how good he is. The only knock you can even put on him is just conspiracy theories and speculation. He's number 1 overall pick again. Remember what it was last time? He had 2 times where he dealt with injuries. Oh, he's the Madden cover now. That's all I got. And then also, when we've been doing best balls a lot, like I've said, it's easier to build I feel better about the team when I build. If I have the first pick and I go receiver and that's because of other guys. But if we're doing auction drafts where I can just buy my roster, he's going to go for the most, and he should be. So that plain, point, and simple.
Yeah. So, I mean, don't overthink it when it comes to Christian McCaffrey. Just be like, okay, I get the guy that is going to get all the touches. He's going to win leagues. He's going to have the most touchdowns possibly. It's just get excited about a guy that's good at football.
Right.
And then, but yeah, so we appreciate y'all being here and hanging out with us. That was our top 50 running back rankings, and for fantasy football. We're going to come out with tight ends and wide receivers and all those things. Please go like, comment, subscribe on this video.
Yep.
Tell us why we are wrong, why you dislike and disagree with one of our picks, or where people are. And yeah.
Yeah. Who is your him? Who is the guy that you're targeting this year? Who's your favorite value? Who's the guy that you're not touching? We want to know. Running back's a very interesting thing this year, because this year I think it's truly everybody's just pushing up receiver, and a lot of these really talented running backs getting the short end of the stick, a lot of great value.
Mm-hmm.
And so really a lot of it's just take your pick. And we have these big tiers, but sometimes there's not that big of a gap between any of them, and it's picking the best schedule, your preference, guy you got vibes with. We want to hear who you are, and maybe that'll be a difference, and we can give a shout out, and we can be drafting guys saying, hey, Joe Blow Schmo told us to get Ken Walker, and so that's what we're going to ride with in this draft.
Right, exactly. And so we'll see y'all during Wednesday night live streams.
Yep.
So come hang out.
We'll be starting with that soon, but pretty much every Wednesday or Thursday, or basically once a week from this point going forward, the rest of the summer, we're going to be attacking a lot of best ball drafts. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. I think it'll be easier to do those kinds of videos with you guys instead of just doing a draft and then letting y'all watch. It'll be a lot more interactive. It'll be fun, and I'm excited for it. So tune in for it.
Yep. So we'll see y'all next time.